Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Facebook Live with the Horticulturists. I think this is our third time doing this.
Yeah.
So let's start with intros. My name is Candice Hart. I'm a horticulture educator here with U of I in DeWitt, Macon, and Piatt County, so central Illinois area. How about you guys?
I am Kelly Allsup, and I'm Central Illinois also, based out of Bloomington.
Ryan Pankau, I'm the horticulture educator right here in Champaign-Urbana, so Champaign, Vermilion, Ford, and Iroquois counties.
Yeah, so we're coming at you here from Champaign here on campus. If you guys have gardening questions, start hitting them into the chat box there. We've got a couple of questions that people had commented with earlier, but what do you guys do? You want to start with our photos first? Do you want to go through some questions? Want to do kind of what talk about what we got in the garden?
Sure. Why don't we talk about our stuff we
brought? You want to start, Ryan?
Yeah, so I brought in some photos this time around of Monarch caterpillars in action. So eating some leaves and getting bigger by the second. And actually, I wish I could have got some video of that because it actually is pretty interesting to watch them eat. But so this all came about from a project that my family has done for the last couple of years. We've raised Monarch caterpillars to butterflies each year. And the reason why we've done that is because in the wild, Monarch caterpillars really only have about a 10% chance of survival. So if you bring them in and protect them from a lot of the predation they're subject to in the wild, you can more successfully raise them and give them a better chance at survival. So I guess to even go back a step, why are we concerned about monarchs? Well, they're kind of the poster child for the plight of the pollinators. So nationwide,
jumping on board with the monarchs.
Yeah. So nationwide, pollinators are declining, and monarchs have kind of become the poster child for this because they're so common. Everybody's caught a monarch in a butterfly net when they were a kid. We've all seen them before. They're widespread across the U.S., and they have this really dramatic migration they do every year. So every year, at the end of the season here, all of our monarchs either migrate down to Mexico or out west towards California in that direction, and oftentimes it's thousands of miles that these insects travel, hibernate over the winter, and travel back to our area. So it's gained a lot of attention as in the areas that they hibernate at, those numbers have plummeted, and researchers around the world around North America have noticed those numbers drastically declining. So that's how they've recently got all this attention. But it's definitely an interesting life cycle these insects have. The caterpillars are specific to a single set of host species, and that's all of our native milkweeds. So we have about 24 native milkweeds to Illinois, and so any of these caterpillars that need food have to be on a milkweed to eat. So our little caterpillar rearing project at my house has kind of grown over the years. It's been a couple years since we started doing this, and my wife certainly gets the credit for doing all the research on how to do it. She's a wildlife biologist and really looked into this ahead of time. So I will say that, folks, that before you do start to try and raise caterpillars, please educate yourself on everything they need and how to provide the best growing environment to them. But probably the biggest problem in all of this is supplying enough milkweed to these guys as they grow, because they go from a little tiny speck to about a 2 or 3 inch long caterpillar in just a couple weeks, and they grow 2,000 times larger than they were when they hatch in that short chunk of time, and so they have to consume a lot of plant material. So we are constantly scrounging for milkweeds around our property and other places right now, but I would have brought some of these guys in, but unfortunately, like over the weekend, they all pupated, so they're all in chrysalises now and will be a butterfly in about 10 days.
Which is good. They survived that long, so hopefully.
Yeah, we had 2 that didn't make it out of probably, I never got a complete count. My wife probably knows exactly, but a dozen or more that we reared, that 2 of them didn't make it, and that's because they were parasitized as a caterpillar or as an egg. And that's how a lot of the the predation of these caterpillars happens, is when they're in the caterpillar stage, and it's not necessarily from a big old bird you would think of that would swing in and gulp it up, but it's a lot of microorganisms and other things that cause disease and other infections, or lay their eggs inside the caterpillar that then later hatch and do bad things to the caterpillar. So it's been really interesting to watch the caterpillars develop. My kids really love it. It's a really educational thing for them. And so it's one way that is pretty labor intensive, but you can do something to kind of help the monarch population. Now, there's a lot of other things you can do since they are so specific to milkweed. Just adding some milkweed to your landscaping is a great thing.
Yeah,
you can do.
which is what I brought from my yard today. I was walking around last night trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to bring today? And I found a couple of monarchs on the milkweed in my garden. This is butterfly weed, or Asclepias tuberosa. So on the plant right now, there's really beautiful orange flowers on some of the other stems. But you can, the way I knew that I had monarchs nearby is you can see that the top of the stem is basically chewed off. And Kelly would be proud too. I looked for poop. You can see there's some frass, which is insect poop, down here at the bottom. So I knew there had to be a caterpillar nearby. But this is one of my favorite milkweeds, is butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa, because it only gets about 2 feet or less. It's a pretty good one for kind of the landscape border, and it's orange flowers, which is really
pretty, really striking.
Yeah,
yeah,
one of my favorites.
Actually, of course, I have to put my 2 cents in, but. Illinois Natural History Survey just put out an article last fall, I'm thinking, saying that they were actually contributing the decline of milkweed to more than just the lack of milkweed. That they were contributing it to the lack of floral resources in the fall. So what was happening is they're building their populations up here in Illinois because of gardeners like yourself and Candice,
planted milkweed,
and the few prairies that we do have. But when they're going on their journey to the south, they don't have enough food to make it. So actually, I wrote an article on my blog about really putting in some of these late season floral resources like aster or Joe Pye weed or Russian sage, and even milkweed is a great late season source.
So the reason being that the butterflies, the adults, need food from flowers.
Yeah, yeah. We think about the caterpillars the most. I feel like 'cause they need like that to feed on, but you're right. They need nectar and food.
And so now, like and this is definitely not my original idea. They're talking about like building a floral highway. So not only do we need to promote planting milkweed, because it's really cool to find your caterpillars, but you also want to plant floral nectar resources for the adults. And it tends to be a trend that a lot of butterflies, their caterpillars will only feed on 1 or 2 species. So when we start losing species because of lack of prairies or habitat, then we lose entire caterpillars. But actually, I've had a lot of questions come in about caterpillars lately, and most of the time they're moths.
Really?
Because we have, 150 species of butterflies in Illinois, but 1,850 of moths.
Oh.
So I thought that was really cool. Not only as extension educators can we teach people to plant milkweed, but plant asters too.
Yeah. All the good fall stuff. Okay, guys, hit us with your questions. I know there's some of you watching now. So before I think we talk about the other insect, we were going to talk about a couple of others. Let's take a couple of the questions that came in beforehand on some of the comments. So Brenda is asking why the lower leaves on her tomato plant are turning yellow. So this could be a couple things.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I know for sure tomatoes are heavy feeders, so unlike some of your other garden vegetables, they actually do require some fertilizing. And so when I plant my tomatoes, I always do a starter fertilizer, usually at the time of planting or maybe 2 or 3 weeks after, when the roots actually start mining the soil, is kind of left over from the greenhouse girl in me. But then you also want to fertilize them again when you start to see little small baby tomatoes. And then again 3 weeks later, and again 6 weeks later. Now, we want to use an ammonium nitrate. I know that's a big word. It's on the back. It's you look, when you have your fertilizer and it's 10-10-10, that means nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Well, under nitrogen, it'll actually tell you what kind of nitrogen you actually have. And so ammonium nitrate is just a preferred source because it doesn't produce the leggy growth that you actually might prefer in the beginning, but it actually produces more substantial growth. So you can do a 10-10-10, you can do an ammonia nitrate, you can side dress it, you can do a liquid feed. But other than those really 4 times, you don't have to fertilize much more. But but you know, when there's a nitrogen deficiency, the first thing that happens is it pulls the nitrogen from the old leaves and gives it to the new leaves. But you know what? Just pinch off those leaves.
Yeah, pinch them
You
off.
don't need them.
Because the other thing that could be happening, there are a couple of fungal diseases that can affect tomatoes, and many of those do tend to start at the base or at the soil line, because some of those can actually splash up. The soil will splash onto the leaves, and that's how they become infected. So either way, I would clean off those yellow leaves, try to get, whether it's a fertilizer issue or a fungal issue, and then just keep an eye on it.
Well, and a great control for a lot of those diseases that do splash up from the soil is just mulch.
Yeah,
like I've pretty effectively controlled that in our garden with just heavy mulch. I use straw a lot.
Yeah, prevent that splashing.
I use straw a lot.
Yeah. Great question, Brenda. Okay, and it looks like we've got a couple coming in here in the comments. So Andrea's saying that she's lost several zucchini plants. They've just turned yellow. They didn't produce much, and what did produce tended to rot before they got big enough to harvest. Was this because of all the rain this year? What do you think? I saw another question posted on, I think it was on Facebook the other day. It was an extension office up north, and he was posting the same thing, that he had squash plants that they were just not producing. They would just kind of rot. And what he was attributing it to a poor pollination issue is what he was attributing his problem with.
Yeah, I think that's the case a lot of times. Yeah. But you know, an otherwise healthy plant that's just not producing fruit, that's the case a lot of times, is pollination.
Yeah, that's
so
especially if it's setting fruit and that fruit is just not maturing.
Yeah.
That tends to be the issue. I know a couple of people had asked about just not having many flowers, and I think some of that was attributed to that hot spell. It was during that really kind of hot period, and I think that's where that was coming from. But yeah, he thought it was a pollination issue. Heavy rain.
So you know, what can we do to fix the pollination issue? I mean, I guess maybe try and plant more pollinator habitats.
Yeah, exactly. Try to bring more bees, more other pollinators.
Yeah, if your squash plants are the only flower that's there to attract anything, then you know, you're not going to have a lot of visitors. But if you have a large amount of other things that can draw them in, it can help.
Yeah.
I would plant like zinnias or sweet alyssum or borage. Or, you know, even like a flowering thyme or oregano might encourage more beneficial insects. Plus, it'll be prettier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's nice to have a little strip of flowers in your garden.
Yeah, marigolds, whatever.
It can kind of work into your crop rotation as well if you're doing that. So.
Totally. Okay.
And actually, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Actually, you know, for squash, they say, and I know I say this loosely, to let your radishes bloom, because you know cole crops are wonderful for pollinators, and they'll help bring in beneficial insects that will help keep your squash bugs under control.
There you go. That could work.
But usually when things don't flower, I always blame the sun.
Yeah, that could be too.
I always say,
not enough sunlight.
Is it enough sun? Are you truly getting, because squash, what is it, 8 hours of sun?
At least,
you have
if you really want a good, Okay, Andrea also has a question about her peony plants. They have brown spotting on their leaves, and I can answer that one because that's a common question. Because this happens almost every year. Peonies tend to get kind of a 1-2 punch of powdery mildew, which won't have the brown spotting, but powdery mildew will have a lightish white-gray kind of powder on the leaves, very common on peonies. But the brown spotting is actually caused by botrytis blight, which is another common disease of peony. It's never going to kill your plant, but it just tends to kind of happen every year. So typically what I'll do is I'll go in and kind of cut out some of the affected foliage, try to increase the airflow a little bit, and you'll be okay. You could do a preventative spray earlier in the year, but it never harms the plant, and it happens later in the season after they're done flowering, so it's never really a huge.
So yeah, that's the kind of thing I would probably mechanically remove the infected leaves, just to kind of stop the source and just go on with life.
Yeah, exactly. It could be worse. Okay, Deborah's got a question here. All of my tomatoes are producing fruit except for one, the largest plant, although it's blossoming. How can I troubleshoot?
Although it's blossoming.
So she's got flowers.
Maybe it's just a later variety than the rest.
That's
That
quite
could be.
possible, yeah.
Because some, they say they say you can produce in 10 weeks, some are 12 weeks, and so that's what farmers do all the time is they'll plant some early varieties and some later varieties, so they constantly have something to sell at the farmers market. So if it has flowers, I would not fret.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried.
I wouldn't worry yet.
Yeah, when I first read it, then I saw that she had blossoms. If there wasn't blossoms and it was a huge plant with mostly foliage, then I would go back to our then I would go back to our discussion about fertilizing, and maybe there's too much.
And I maybe planted a little bit late, but I have a lot of tomato plants in my garden right now that have flowers but no fruits yet. So it's.
And I only planted 2 tomatoes because. I'm not a glutton for punishment, but and mine are just really small tomatoes. They're like a acorn size at this point.
We've
so
had
I would just keep
had a few aromas ripe and some sun golds. The little cherry tomatoes are ripe at our house now, but the vast majority of the tomatoes we planted don't really have much in the way of a very good size of fruit yet. So.
I've already had a harvest of eggplants.
Oh, nice.
So I think I planted eggplants in the middle of May. And eggplant is actually my favorite go-to vegetable because it is so easy to grow. You just have to put it in the ground and you get these big, huge, humongous fruits. And, there's nothing like, get a good recipe for eggplant. It's awesome. I convince every community garden I work with, I'm like, please grow eggplant. And they're like, well, we don't know if we'll eat eggplant. And then they realize how easy it is to use eggplant and how easy it is to grow. And then every community garden that I've convinced to grow eggplant now grow eggplant on their own.
Yeah.
Well, what a beautiful, attractive fruit, too. For
yeah.
ornamental value.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing else
the flowers
is big and
are pretty.
purple.
It's all, yeah.
You'll have like a 2-foot plant with these 5 huge vegetables on it. It's really quite a great plant.
Yeah. So I would just keep waiting, Deborah. I think since you have blossoms, I think you're good. It'll just take some time.
Should we say hi to Mom?
Oh, hey, Mom. My mom's on again. Michelle is asking, she has lost many zucchini plants to insects. Do we think vine borer? I can't think of the name. They will overnight, it seems like.
Yeah, that's the symptoms of vine borer.
Yeah.
Is like you'll have beautiful, healthy plants, and then you'll come out the next day and they'll be completely gone. When it comes to vine borer, and it comes to squash bugs too. I mean, I always tell people, this is my favorite thing to say in entomology classes. Say, okay, everybody, now write this down. This is the secret to getting rid of squash, vine borer, and squash bugs. And then I say, don't grow squash.
That's what I was going to say. Don't plant it.
And it is a joke. But what is happening is you keep planting the same crop and you keep getting the same problem. And so if you took a couple of years off, then you might not be attracting the same problem over and over. But when it comes to squash, vine borer, they are pretty good flyers. And I try to convince my master gardeners to do this too. Because this is what organic farmers do. They cover their crops.
Put a row cover on
They put row covers over their squash. So you'll go to a farm, you'll see row covers over the squash. And you don't really take it off until you need the pollination of the
the flowers
fruits.
are opening.
But then she's probably would have already taken it off and still has the squash vine borer.
Yeah, but the row covers are really great for a lot of things. I mean, eggplant's one thing I use it on
for the flea
beetles early in the season. But nowadays, there's really great sets of the little bows you can purchase already made, or I've made them out of just PVC, just narrow PVC pipes that I took just rebar that they fit over and hammered in along and it doesn't take too many of the little bows to hold up the floating row cover. I mean, it's a great way to solve insect problems organically.
Yeah, and maybe plant a couple extra plants too, because you kind of count on something happen every year. I feel like whether it's vine borer or squash bugs that are giving bacterial wilt or something.
And everybody wants to grow squash. Everybody wants it because it's so easy.
Well, it is, yeah.
And
you get a ton.
And you get a ton from it. Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know for sure, but my instinct is telling me there's probably some variety of zucchini out there that might be less susceptible.
I don't know. Somebody should find it if there's if there is.
Well,
Too bad I don't have an internet right now.
There's certainly ways to control for those borers.
Okay.
I mean, there's a number of different ways you can do it. Diatomaceous earth for caterpillars is something that just shreds them. Mm-hmm. So that's something you can spread. From the organic standpoint, BT is a spray that you can use to control these guys. I know folks that actually inject that into the stems at the base. That's another method of application for BT. So there's things you can do to control them, but I think in the grand scheme of things, and to save yourself all the labor and worries, and I mean those type of control measures to me it's at a point where I've really went to an extreme, and it does take a lot of attention and timing and things like that to get that successful. That I think a better recommendation is definitely Kelly's of excluding them or trying to break that cycle of the population by not having the plant in your garden for a year or so.
Yeah, because it's a moth, right, Kelly? The adult is a moth of vine borer, or is it?
Can't say for sure, but I think it is.
I
think it is a moth. Mm-hmm. That's why the caterpillar, the BT, would work.
It's so susceptible.
Yeah,
to that.
Yeah. So if you can keep that adult moth from getting in to lay its egg, that's kind of your first barrier.
I've even heard about folks that are good enough at identifying it. They can actually get in there and cut that out of the stem and pull out the larva. So I mean that's another way you can deal with it. That's pretty organic and.
If you're like a surgeon, maybe.
Well, and again, it takes careful observation to do that, and it's just tricky to get it to work right.
For sure.
Michelle could teach one of her children to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, train somebody to help.
That could be a 4-H project.
Exactly. Okay, keep those questions coming, and while we wait for the next one, let's do one of our ones that came in earlier. We've got kind of two different lawn questions here that I think we can kind of answer at once. So Heidi's asking, she's getting brown patches in the south side of her lawn. She's checked for grubs and it's not that. She waters several times a week when it's needed. Any ideas? What do we think? I know none of us are really like lawn people, but we can.
Yeah, that's probably one of my weak points.
I know. There is a disease called brown patch,
right? So
that's something to check out. And I know we have a lot of info. If you go to the Lawn Talk website, one of our websites from U of I Extension is called Lawn Talk, and it has basically anything you would need to know about your lawn on there.
I think the Home Yard Garden and Pest newsletter had an article about that just maybe last month. Mm-hmm. So check that out. There's info in there on it.
Check out brown patch. The other thing to think about is maybe if you have pets, if you have dogs that tend to pee in the same spot, that can be an issue of browning, burning the lawn. So. I would go to Lawn Talk and see if you can find some photos of something with similar symptoms.
And if you can't diagnose it yourself, you can always, this would be a great candidate to send into the plant clinic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's, a nominal fee to find out exactly what you have, and they give you exact recommendations of what to do. So, with us, horticulturists, we can look at a picture of something and we can go, it kind of looks like this, it could be this, but you send things to the plant clinic and they'll tell you exactly what it is.
They can culture it out, look at it under a microscope,
a lot more accurate capabilities than we have in our field office.
So all you have to do is type in University of Illinois Plant Clinic. You'll get their website. They tell you how to submit samples. They have a sheet for you to fill out. And it's just a wonderful resource, you can even send them pictures. So they're just that good there to figure it out.
Yeah, they'll really work with you to get to the bottom of it by whatever means.
Absolutely. Okay, so Greg also has a lawn question. He's asking the best thing to use to get rid of grubs in your yard. He has brown patches everywhere as well, and he thinks they're grubs, in his case. So he said that he put on Grub X in the spring, but heard it was too early.
That is true, because grubs are they're rather large in the spring, and they're starting to pupate, and when a grub pupates, it does not eat. So when it comes to grub control, there are a few chemicals that could potentially attack those larger grubs in the spring, but when it comes to grub control, we actually want you to control the grubs when they're small. So when are the grubs small? Right now. Right now, when you actually see the adult Japanese beetles, the adult June bugs, they're laying eggs in your yard when they're adults. So that's when they're the smallest, and you can then you'll get the best kill. I actually have an article on my blog. I'm not trying to promote my blog, but I don't know the article right offhand. It's Flowers, Fruits, and Frass, and it's called grub control for Japanese beetles, and you can look for there's information all over the resources, and you can also and I could actually share that with Erin, and we can get it on the website right after this. Share that particular blog article, so you can see particular chemicals for you use in the spring and particular chemicals you use now. Yeah. But just so you know, this is what I always say when people ask me about grub control. If you're trying to take care of your lawn, that's one thing. But if you think that you're going to get rid of the adults by controlling the grubs, that is never going to happen. And it isn't really until you have these huge numbers of grubs that you really even want to treat.
And it tends to be a moisture issue too. Mm-hmm. If you're watering your lawn on a regular basis, if you have an irrigation system, those tend to be the lawns that have the biggest grub
problem.
Because that's where Japanese beetles want to lay their eggs.
So if you are watering, maybe cut back on the watering, stop the irrigation, and that will eliminate some grubs right there without doing anything else. Yeah. Okay, let's see. I know we got a couple other questions in here. Hey, this is a great question for me. Andrea is asking, I'm interested in starting a flower farm. Any advice or literature you can recommend on this subject? That is very timely, because I'm actually headed to Springfield. A group of flower farmers throughout the state were actually working on some flowers for the opening of the governor's mansion this week. So we are actually trying to put together kind of an Illinois alliance of flower farmers. So Andrea, send me an email or send me a message, and I'll hook you up with that. A great place to start is the National Organization for Flower Farmers is ASCFG, American Cut Flower Specialty. I can't remember what it stands for. It's something like that. American Specialty Cut Flower Growers Association. I think that's what it stands for. But they have a ton of resources on their website. So shoot me an email, Andrea, or a message on Facebook, and I'd love to talk to you about that. Because we need more flower farmers, for sure. Okay, Deborah's asking, besides monarchs, what are some good garden pollinators we can expect to see out and about right now?
If you have parsley, then you're going to have parsley caterpillars or larvae of black swallowtails.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those.
Hoover flies are about to just jump in their population right now, because it's usually at the fair where you have that sweat bee. You're like, get off of me. And you think it's a bee, but it's actually a Hoover fly. Oh, amazing pollinator. Don't kill them, please. Actually, its larva is a beneficial insect, and they're about to skyrocket in population. Another one is the cicada killers and the spider killers are going to really start jumping up in their population. And even though they seem kind of menacing, they're wonderful pollinators. And with the cicada killer, if it's coming up and it's all up in your face, you know how the cicada killers.
I just had one in my face today, actually this morning. Something huge flew by my face. I'm like, that must have been.
It's a male. Killer. It's a male, and he's just making sure Candice is not another male in his territory.
Nope.
And you know what? He can't sting.
Yeah. So I wasn't worried. I was just like, whoa.
Only the female can sting, and she's back, doing work. Right, not terrorizing people walking through the garden. So that's why I know I'm digressing, but That's why I love telling people that, we as horticulturists were like, do this. No, don't do this. No, do this. And I say, mulch. You want to mulch because you want to conserve moisture. But don't mulch everything, because then you're covering up the areas where you could have some of these beneficial wasps and these ground nesting bees, if you want that kind of thing, which I do.
Yeah, it depends.
So, there's lots of bees out right now. What else are you seeing?
I'm noticing a lot of just butterflies and moths flying around.
I'm seeing lots of moths are pretty big this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know. I think Kelly Estes wrote an article about army worm moths.
Oh yeah, that was in that.
So mostly bees and moths and butterflies is what I'm noticing for the most part.
But
yeah, lots of them. Keep those flowers around, and you'll have pollinators for sure. Okay, Andrew's got great questions. She's asking. I've considered predatory nematodes for Japanese beetle control. Any advice on when to spray them in?
I actually was on the verge of saying that, but didn't want to overtake my partners here.
You go, Kelly.
But yes, I think nematodes is a really cool, beneficial, biological kind of pesticide that you can use for nematodes. The one thing about nematodes is you can order them online, and you can order them specifically for Japanese beetle grubs. But, just from my experience in the greenhouse of using nematodes, what I found is I had to constantly shake my solution to keep them from settling to the bottom. And they die. What they do is they contact the beetle grub, and then they swim into one of their open orifices. And so if they don't get to that location, then they're going to go ahead and die out, because they don't. It'll once it dries out in your lawn, they're dead. And another thing is they'll break down in the sun too. So you want to do it at night
when it's going to rain.
Yeah.
Like when it's moist
okay. And so what you get these mine when I've done it, I got this cake. And you put it in there, and they're live nematodes, and you keep shaking it up, and then you sprinch your lawn. And it's a one-time shot, and but once they get in, the nematodes get into the Japanese beetle grub, they'll reproduce. And
so the conditions have to be kind of ideal.
The conditions have to be perfect, yes.
And you're not going to find that at a garden center. You have to order.
No, you're going to have to order that offline. Right. You're going to have to go through a specific company, and they'll tell they're selling a product. They're going to tell you exactly what you need to do. But that's just from my personal experience, as far as when I was sprinching or drenching nematodes. What's the difference between sprinching? Just spraying water
I'm
on the
not
plants.
familiar with this term, sprinching.
Not making the water kind of airy-like. What's the word?
I don't know.
When you spray, you want it to be... Okay, come on, help me. I look like a non-scientist.
Drench? I don't know what word you're trying to go.
Well, drench is when you directly spray it in the soil. Sprinching is where you put water on your plant. And mist. Then when you spray, thank you.
There we go. Hey, whatever.
I lose my words a lot.
Whatever it takes, it works. But again, this would control the grub.
The grubs.
Not the adult. So if you're trying to control adult Japanese beetles, again, not going to work, because they're just going to fly in from your neighbor.
Yeah, they're just so widespread in turf throughout your community that you're really doing a small dent in the adult population with what you control in your yard.
So I have noticed that this year has not been that bad.
It has been bad at my house.
Yeah. I brought, that's what I brought with me, was a couple different things that'll show up later. It was kind of hard to find stuff that was actually damaged with Japanese beetles, which was kind of unique. So I clipped a little bit of raspberry. Raspberry's if they don't have Japanese beetles, there's none around. That's the magnet of Japanese beetle, and you can see how it just kind of eats through the leaf like that. So that I was able to find, and then quince was the other one in my landscape that I was able, which looks a little bit different than kind of traditional Japanese beetle foliage.
The more skeletonized.
Yeah, because this is a thicker, like more waxy leaf, so it doesn't quite kind of go all the way through like it does with the more delicate raspberry foliage. So yeah, I've noticed the same thing, that there's some, but definitely not huge numbers.
Like last year, I was getting phone calls from people, who have apple tree farms, just desperate to take care of these Japanese beetles, and I'm like, I'm helpless because I don't know what to tell them to do that they aren't already doing. And then my crabapple tree, it was completely defoliated. Now it's just like half of it is defoliated. My ostrich fern were absolutely decimated last year.
And
they haven't been
There's
touched.
two really tall lindens, right, where you pull out of the driveway for the extension office here in Champaign. And last year they were just like a skeleton in the upper third. And this year I can't even tell anything's going on yet with those. So I think it is a good year,
but I
good year for plants.
I can't say that for the whole state because I do think we have like hot spots.
Yeah. And I think it depends what you have planted too. Like if you're a raspberry grower, you're gonna have a lot of Japanese beetles. Or if you're a rose growing a bunch of roses, you're gonna have Japanese beetles.
Or if you have a linden in your front yard, you're always going to have problems with Japanese beetles.
So we could talk for a minute about recommended control for Japanese beetles.
Totally.
I mean, really, the story on it is get out early and get it taken care of sooner rather than later, because the more of an infestation you have, the more it draws in more beetles. And really, the thing I recommend to folks is just the knocking them off the limb into a soapy bucket of water.
It's labor intensive,
but if you get after it early, it really pays off this time of year. So really, what you're doing is anytime you bump these guys on a leaf, they flush. And a lot of them just drop straight down. Some of them fly. So you're kind of capitalizing on that reaction you're going to get out of the insects by taking a bowl of soapy water and putting it right under a limb and just hitting it on the top of the bowl. And so those insects fall into the beetles fall into the soapy water, and that clogs their breathing holes, and they die really quickly. And so by removing them from the plant, you've removed a lot of the pheromone they're going to leave that draws others in, and just a lot of the attractiveness of this damaged plant that's also releasing some scents that can attract beetles. And so you kind of have to nip it in the bud. Like when you get to this point in the year and they're really bad in your yard, it's kind of beyond that point of control. But there's certainly different insecticides you can spray and things that are not very selective but do work well on Japanese beetles. But you have to realize every time you spray those, you're killing some more beneficial insects too.
Everything else too.
They're a really hard one just because they are so
I wish we had like a
extensive.
magical answer when people ask this, but
and
there's
it's
not.
probably the most asked question.
Oh, for sure,
in the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
I always remove my lacy foliage. Especially my basil, I'll just cut it back.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to come back.
Well, I think this is what I recommend a lot is not necessarily control across your whole yard if you have it bad, but a floating row cover to exclude it from that rose bush right by your front door or whatever it is.
Because they're here for 4 to 6 weeks typically. It's not like they're here all season. It's a short period of when they're in the adult stage.
And it did freeze last year.
Yeah, we had a fairly, I don't know how deep it went, but we had a fairly good ground freeze last winter, which I think contributes.
I'm not going to say for sure, but I think it was at least 3 feet.
I don't know.
No, because if it freezes really fast, then they don't have enough time to go down. But if it takes a long time for it to freeze, then they'll gradually go down, and they'll kind of save themselves from the ground frost.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we had. It was fairly warm, kind of up into December even, and then winter hit pretty hard.
And then there was like time where it froze, and then it stayed frozen for a while, and it was below a certain degrees. But that doesn't always. Even though we say that happens, it doesn't always so, because
it's hard to say.
You would have thought that they would have, because it did freeze, you would have thought that it would have been later for them to come out, but they were out in the second week of June.
Yeah,
almost.
It seemed early. Yeah.
I think sometimes a bigger factor is just like the natural cycles that happen during the growing season,
just the
and
weather,
how many eggs are laid too the summer before. So there's a lot more than just winter, and I mean it's really hard to ever predict why we do or don't have a big population.
I know, it's hard to say.
But yeah, it's interesting to think about that though. Like what's going on underneath the soil in the middle of winter when it's frozen and there's little grubs trying to get away from it. You know, it's neat to think about.
It is. Yeah. Okay, we got a couple other questions here. Mary said she's watching and loving this. Thanks, Mary, for watching. Leah asked, what are your recommendations for a novice gardener on taking care of, in parentheses, not killing, outdoor containers? So for a newbie container gardener,
a big
what
container.
would you say?
Watering.
Yeah, right. Watering it. That's really,
That's been my biggest problem.
Once you have it planted, and you're right, a bigger container is going to give you more soil mass, which is going to stay moist for a longer period of time, which can help you in the long run. So,
and Leah, start off slow. Grow herbs. Easy to grow herbs, and then gradually go. Oh well, maybe I'll do a thing of beets or Swiss chard this year. And I really think that I have the most success the bigger container I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't have to water as often, and you can grow a lot more in it too, which is great, obviously.
Yeah, you can add a bigger volume of water to it. I think the neat thing about container gardening is that it's the one time we can absolutely control the growing medium.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in your garden, if you have too much clay, that's something that's really hard to ever overcome. You know. But think about the medium you're using and what plants you're growing, and trying to match that together too, because there's a lot of options.
And the site too, whether it's full sun, part shade, whatever you're putting the container makes a difference too. Yeah.
And Leah's a cook too, so she would probably benefit from, just growing a few herbs in the beginning and getting successful with them.
Yeah.
But when it comes to basil, what I've noticed with basil in containers is it's better to start with seed than to start with a plant, because every time I start with a plant, it starts to flower really early. But when I start with seed, it stays in vegetative state longer, and I'm harvesting more of the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe with your thyme and your rosemary, you go out and you get a 4-inch pot and you plant them in your container, but use basil seed, and then use lettuce seed. And the secret to lettuce is to harvest it when it's 3 inches.
Yeah,
don't eat it when it's 7 inches because it tastes nasty.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's hard to do too when you have that nice, beautiful stand of small lettuce plants. It's hard to pick it,
but why are you growing it?
Yeah.
And I love growing Swiss chard. I think it's really easy to grow Swiss chard, especially in the cool weather. And you could go out and get a container of soil right now and still do some basil and still do some Swiss chard, and you just over broadcast your seeds, put some soil on top of it, water it. But right now I have huge pots in my yard. They're probably 25-gallon pots. They're huge. And I'm watering every 2 days at this point. I wasn't before, but because of the temperature,
you
I'm
really
watering every 2 days.
You really have to keep on it. You just have an above ground, smaller mass of soil than we would have in the ground.
And she says, I should grow some herbs. She has some annuals right now, and they're doing well, so that's good. Doing good so far. Yeah.
I love herbs. I grow them and I don't use them, so.
Hey, right, that's me too. They're pretty, so I just grow them as a nice.
They're pretty. They smell good.
Pot, something for the pot.
Got some parsley for the swallowtails. Some basil for the Japanese beetles.
I see your goal. Yeah. Okay, Andrew's asking about berries. She's been unsuccessful in growing any berry bushes, any kind of them. Any advice on growing berries? What would you say is the easiest?
Raspberries.
One? Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I've got a couple of plants of raspberry and blackberry that I got on clearance somewhere that I just kind of threw in a spot in the garden. I haven't done anything to them, and I just kind of let them go. Now I didn't get a whole lot of fruit off of it because
still a young plant.
It's still young. It's only been in there a year or two. But that or strawberries are fairly easy too. That'd be.
I don't think they're easy.
No?
I don't know. One thing, if they're still newer plants, I don't know if every single berry plant, but a lot of them bear on second-year wood.
Yeah, so you kind of have to wait.
The first year, you wouldn't get any. It takes a little time to build up that crown.
Yeah. The trickiest of all of them is probably going to be blueberry because there's just so much soil amendment that needs to happen.
But we have a native blueberry called high bush blueberry that would be a great alternative to that.
Yeah.
You're not going to have as many blueberries as you would a blueberry bush, but it's going to be much easier to grow.
Yeah, and you can actually do those in containers too, where you can pick what kind of soil you're putting in there.
So high bush blueberry.
Yeah.
And berries. I have to say something because I always have an opinion. Amelanchers, service berries. These are small, they're large shrubs or multi-stem shrubs, or they're single-stemmed small trees. And they're native. They have beautiful flowers. They have amazing tasting berries. They taste like blueberries, but better. And they have really great fall color. So if you're looking for a large shrub or a small tree that you possibly have room for, I would go for serviceberry, because it might actually, you don't really have to do much.
Yeah, I think there's even some winter interest in the bark for me. I mean, it's a pretty smooth bark as it gets bigger, so really kind of a 4-season plant.
Yeah, I have one in the corner of my house, and I love it,
Do you eat the berries, or do you let the birds have it?
No, the birds tend to get them, I guess, before I even think about it,
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I tell people, if they're wanting birds, that serviceberry is a great one.
It is great for birds.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, keep those questions coming. We've got like 15 minutes still, so let's see if we missed any. Oh, Brenda, so we answered your tomato plant question earlier in the session. If you want to, once this is done, this will be posted on the Facebook page, so you can go back and play it again. So we did answer your question about the leaves turning yellow, so you can go back and check that out. Janet has a question here. Why are my blue spruce trees only green at the tips? The rest of the branch looks dead. Oh, blue spruce. Should we break it to her?
Yeah. Well, I can kind of start on this one. I guess
go for it.
The root of the problem is the fact that blue spruce is not native to here and has problems in our climate and soils. So. Really, any blue spruce we plant is going to look great. I mean, they look wonderful when they're young. I absolutely love the foliage, that nice blue,
it's beautiful
blue color. Just a beautiful plant. I see why it was brought here as a landscape plant, but just over time, they're going to succumb to a number of different conditions, and that's what's going on with your tree. There's a needle cast that they get. There's a canker. They suffer from girdling roots, which is not a disease, but a problem the tree has. So over time, they just start to kind of thin out, and growth is just at the tips, and it's just part of that slow decline into it being a dead tree or one that needs to be removed.
It seems to happen once they reach like that 20, 25-year-old, right when they're good size. That's when the problems
I handle this question a lot out of our office.
We get it a lot.
Yeah, we do too.
Really, the way I kind of look at it is when somebody says, "What can I do with my blue spruce?" If you look at your tree and you've lost about a third of your needle mass, so about a third of the canopy, that's probably to the point where it's not really worth initiating treatment. But if you're early on in this cycle, there are things you can do to stop some of the spread of these conditions. But it starts with like accurate diagnosis of what it is that's causing it. And there's, a handful of things that could be on your blue spruce.
Yeah, and this is another great one for the plant clinic. They actually have a fact sheet. I believe it's called Spruce Problems fact sheet.
That's
so
a great
if you put in our search bar Spruce Problems fact sheet, it'll come right up, and we can maybe link it in the comments. But because it's going to show you all the different diseases that could it be, the environmental issues. Because we just get this question so common that they put together that for us. So
I think spruce has a tough issue with drought too. They can't do winter drought. They can't do summer drought. Their roots are so shallow that they can't make it through our conditions without extra care.
I have one that's probably 20, 30 feet tall next to a building, and it's going to have to come out in the next couple of years because it starts at the bottom, it slowly progresses up, and it's just...
And if the plant clinic, if you want to submit a sample to the plant clinic, you're going to submit live and dead tissue, because other things can grow on dead tissue, and they'll find other things that aren't the cause of the tree death. They're going to tell you to do a preventative spray before you actually see the symptoms, because once you see the symptoms of tree diseases, it's too late. There's nothing you can do at this point in time. So if there is, like he says, if there's less than a third damage, then and you do get that recommendation from the plant clinic, you're not going to do anything until next spring.
Well, so that's maybe the good news, is that you have some time here to figure it out, and any of these sprays that would be recommended happen very early spring before the next batch of needles gets infected. So there's time yet this year to kind of get a plan together for next year. One thing that just always helps and is a good practice is pruning out that dead. Like all the dead stuff is never going to have needles on it again. That's a question I get a lot.
Yeah, it's not.
So
it's not going to leaf
It can
out.
come out. Yeah.
But didn't she say it's green on the tips and dead on the inside?
Yeah. Well,
she's gonna be pruning the whole tree, probably.
Yeah, it's sometimes hard to prune all the dead out, but the bigger dead limbs, I mean, all that's an infection vector for the rest of the tree. So.
Get it out of there.
And for those of you who don't have symptoms of any conifer diseases yet, when you do have needle drop, which it happens naturally, make sure you clean that up every winter, because that's a really great, you have a diseased tree. Clean it up in the fall. That's a wonderful way to prevent next year getting inoculated.
Yeah, and there's our spruce problems fact sheet in the comments there, so check it out. If you have any kind of spruce in your yard, it's good to be aware of what could happen.
It's a really good one. It kind of talks about everything you need to think about.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes left, so keep those questions coming. Let's go ahead and take this question from Heather that she put in beforehand. She really wants to understand how to make a rain-ready garden with plants native to our area. Her property sits lowest on the block. So, rain gardens. I put one in my previous house and enjoyed it a lot. I kind of had a natural sloping area coming off the gutter. So, basically what I did, Heather, was to kind of dug out that area a little bit, created a kind of a mound or a dam at the base of where I wanted that garden to end so that the water would pool in that area and then naturally filtrate into the soil. I just filled it with natives. I had purple coneflower, black-eyed Susan, coreopsis, just a variety of different natives, because they tend to be a little more adaptable to that kind of fluctuation of from going very wet to very dry. That's really what you want, are kind of
those
adaptable,
extremes.
Adaptable plants for a rain garden. Yeah.
I think cardinal flower would be excellent for that wet condition too.
Yeah.
I would, if I were you, it's hard for us to, I don't think any one of us are an expert in this, but I would go visit a rain garden.
Yeah.
And maybe see what kind of plants they're growing and what's doing well. I know we just, in the wild ones in our area, just had a talk on rain gardens last Monday,
nice.
So I wish I could have told you to go there.
A great place to get some plant lists and things is in the Pollinator Pockets website. So if you go to the, search UVI extension Pollinator Pockets, and there's actually some designs that have plant lists or even a design laid out for you, and they're made for either a sunny side and full, or a sunny site that's dry, or a sunny site that's wet, or a shady site that's wet. So you can look at some of the designs for the wetter sites there, and that'll give you some good natives that you can add to a rain garden.
Wisconsin Extension also has a really great rain garden resource that I tend to share with people. It's a rain garden manual, basically, and they have the same thing. It's pre-designed layouts, the plants listed, and it's easy, ready to go.
Yeah, the Known Maintenance Garden by Roy Diblick. It's a huge trend right now where he's giving you these specific designs where the plants actually work with each other, and you're not constantly having to go in there and prune this one out of growing into this one and replacing this one, and this one doesn't grow like this one. Yeah. So he has a really good book. I have a perennial book, Tracy Sabato.
Oh yeah, I have that one. What's it?
I hope I'm not butchering her name, but she has these lists in the back.
Yeah.
Of
what is that called?
This one's for part sun. These are the ones you have to deadhead. These are the ones that will handle wet feet, and so it's just a really great resource.
Yeah, it's basically like a perennial manual with maintenance stuff you need to look up. It's there. I can't think of what it's called though. We'll find that out.
She's a pretty big name in the
and world. I know there's several. She's done several new versions of it, so it's a pretty big one. Kelly's asking, best time to plant those natives for the rain garden. Is it too late now in the summer?
I wouldn't do it now. Yeah. I would wait till the fall.
Yeah.
It's like for those of us who had Diane Nolan. Sorry, I know you didn't have her, but Diane Nolan used to say, as long as you can dig in the soil, you can plant your plants. Except when it's 90 degrees out and you have to go out there and water them every day to make sure they're not
It
struggling.
can be done. You're just going to have to water a ton.
Yeah. So I would wait till, the fall would be a really great time to plant, those native perennials. But Kelly probably knows this, that it is hard to find some of those plants that you're looking for in the fall. And usually you don't really have that availability.
Yeah,
in the
so
spring.
like you mentioned wild ones, and that's where I got a lot of the plants that I started mine, and they have that spring plant sale.
I know,
which is a
lot of money,
which is a great place to start, because you're right. Later in the season, unless you go to a specific garden center nursery that sells native, some of them can be hard to.
But even if you go to a native place here in Illinois, you couldn't make an order right now. Or you wouldn't find some of the stuff that you're looking for. Yeah. But there may be some native plants. I know a few garden centers have a little native section. Mm-hmm. Some are more disappointing than others, but
so now's a good time to kind of look at some of those pre-made designs, map out your area, and kind of figure out what exactly you want to plant.
Kelly, you should check out the Wild Ones. It's a really great volunteer organization. I mean, they're not affiliated with the University of Illinois, but they're promoters of native plants. And in my unit, in Bloomington, they have a sale. And they sell native plants in these 3-inch pots, and it's everything you could possibly think of. And so the availability is right there, and they're really cheap plants. And so that's how I did my front yard this year.
And they have chapters that are active in most communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're pretty.
You can usually find one close to you.
Yeah. Oh, good. And we put in the link there for the Wisconsin rain garden information. Okay, we've got 3 minutes, everybody. So we probably have time for like one more question if whoever gets it in there first. So while we wait for that, what else is happening in the garden? Anybody noticing anything else unique this time of year? I just walked mine last night trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to.
Just harvested my garlic.
Yeah.
Last week.
Oh, good.
It's all dry.
Awesome.
So that was nice. A good crop this year.
Yeah. Big bulbs.
Big bulbs, and a lot of it made it just fine. So
I'm sure we're close on potatoes, right?
Potatoes are already out of my house. Yeah.
Really?
They came out about a week before.
They're close at one of the community gardens I work with.
Yeah, and then hopefully those tomatoes will start really
Pretty
coming
soon
on.
It'll be canning tomatoes.
Really coming on strong soon.
And then, in August, you guys could think about growing some more of those cool season crops. Another crop of radishes or beets or leafy greens.
Kale's a good one.
Yeah.
I've had kale go through till January.
Yeah. Or flowers. You can put in those cool season flowers too.
Oh yeah.
So
What's a cool season flower?
I will probably put in another round of stock flowers. I'll probably put back in like some ranunculus, some anemone, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Don't need to grow those veggies.
Do you grow calendula?
I do grow calendula. That'd be a good one too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Totally. So whatever you like in terms of gardening, you can still be doing a lot of stuff in the garden this time of year for sure. And there's our book, Well Tended Perennial Garden. That's what it's called.
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you for
I think a lot of people forget about fall. They're like, I can't do any more gardening.
Yeah.
But you know what? The pest issues are gone. The heat is gone.
Yeah, it's perfect time
you
for
don't
plants.
have all these problems that you have in the spring. So, it would be easier. Just go out and get some seed and plant in a...
I love the fall garden.
Me too.
I do too.
I mean, I've had some of the best success with fall gardening. So that's those spots that have came out now. I'm planting stuff for fall in our garlic and potato areas.
Yeah, yeah. Get all those bulbs in the ground in the fall. That's always a great time to do it too. So awesome. Well, thank you guys for all your great questions today, and thanks for watching us.
Yeah.
We will be back again, I'm sure, because we have a lot of fun doing this.
Yes,
so,
thank you so much.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks.